Hello there, my name is Bea and you're listening to the Biologist of It, where we get the gist of what it is that biologists do. And we do that using fun puns and popular culture references. And if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, be sure to click follow or subscribe on YouTube or your favourite podcasting channel, and you'll never miss an episode like this one today, where I'm joined by the lady of Twitter who likes to yell about nature, the very mysterious Nat. Welcome, Nat.
Hello, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, and I'm quite excited to get Nata in.
Hey, very nice.
Yeah, it's what I do best.
Yeah.
You can't stop me. You could try.
So I know you from Twitter, and actually I was looking back and was trying to remember how I first interacted with you, and I think it was your tweet about the sea bat.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Which gathered so much interest.
Oh my goodness. I'm never gonna hit peak sea bat ever again. I think it got 35,000 likes and the impressions were on the millions.
Oh my goodness.
But just if anyone's not seen it, right, I was on Imager. I don't know if anyone else goes on Imager, but I was on Imager and I saw this amazing video of, I think it was like a sea mollusk type thing, and it was swimming in a jar, like in a sort of, on a ship. And I was like, oh, that's the best thing I've ever seen. It looks like a little bat. And so I took the video and I tried to find the reference. I couldn't find who it belonged to, which is bad practice. But I put it on Twitter anyway and just said, it's a sea bat and I won't be taking any further questions. And it just went nuts. And it went nuts to the point where the lady who took the video on a research expedition was just like, oh, this is my video and I will take questions.
Oh, cool.
Which was really cool. And then I sort of immediately was like, I'm really sorry. That's like bad Twitter practice to not credit the video, but I did try. But when it's a video, it's a bit more difficult than a photograph. So, but I won't make excuses for myself, bad one. But I just sort of responded just saying, video by this person. I think she ended up getting quite a lot of new followers from it as well. And
that's nice.
That's so yeah, she was fine with it. She was like, it's cool, I'm glad that people are looking at it. And she explained I can't remember what it was. It's mollusk with some descripts, but she explained to everybody what it was, I had no idea. To me, it was just a sea bat.
That's so fun. And if anybody wants to see the video, they can find you on Twitter. What's your handle again?
It's at Nat Sabin, Sabin, but most people on Twitter think that my Twitter handle reads Nats Abin. Which I never realized because it's just my surname, right? So I just never thought of it, and generally I go by Natalie, but either's fine. It's just people can't hear what I'm saying when I say Nat because it's too short and they go what, so just Natalie I tend to introduce myself as. But Nat Sabin. Nats a bin. Nats a bin. That's how you can find me on Twitter. Yes.
Bats aside for a second, we will come back to bats in a minute. But you're an ecologist from Oxfordshire. Do you want to give yourself like a little introduction?
Yeah, I've been doing ecology for like 3 years. So I'm a consultant ecologist. So I work in a consultancy that serves clients, and long story short, if they want to build stuff on a piece of land or they want to make changes to an existing building, current wildlife law states that you have to have ecological surveys undertaken in that area. And if there are any protected species nearby, you're going to have to mitigate for loss of habitat or loss of roosts for bats or a loss of ponds for GCN, great crested newts. Sorry, I'll just go to the short end, the great crested newts. And it's basically my job to go there, make those assessments and basically write a report that goes in with the planning application where I outline what is going to happen, and then we give advice for what they need to do in order to keep within the law. Basically.
That's great. Yeah. And it's one of those things that when you're outside of the circle, you don't realize that that's people's jobs. That whenever something needs to be built, someone has to go there and make sure there's nothing precious. So it's really important, but a bit of a lesser known job outside of the circle.
Yeah, I had not heard of it. I got made redundant in 2017. It's a boring story, but I got made redundant and didn't work in wildlife. I have a computer science degree, so it's different. I used to work in project management, and I'd not heard of ecology. I'd not heard of ecologists. I don't have any proper formal education in ecology or wildlife. I have a diploma in practical conservation, which is one of the things that I got after 3 years trying lots of different things, thinking I wanted to be a ranger, managing nature reserves. And I fell into ecology because I was good at report writing from my project management thing. And I did I think I must have done 6 days with a local ecologist, just a sort of one-man band. And I was like, this is it. This is so interesting. Like, it mixes indoor and outdoor. You've got a bit of office time where you can sort of use your brain. You've got a bit of field craft, and so I just sort of fell into it and instantly went, this. It took me 3 years of trying lots of different things and then not taking that traditional route into ecology. So I'm a little bit older in terms of sort of where I am in my career than, a lot of the people at my stage are sort of early to mid 20s because they've come straight out of uni or a master's or whatever, and I'm just sort of like, hello. I'm 31. So
yeah, well,
yeah, but it's rewarding, so
that's great.
I like it a lot.
Yeah.
I
actually, so this was the area that I was initially going to go into following uni, and because it does take 3 years or longer, some people never manage to get into ecology. I ended up moving into teaching, which wasn't the right. That's a whole other story. But doing this sort of work, this ecology consultation, just seems like such a rewarding experience. And if you are an outdoor person, it's perfect, really. It's a good intro for a walk.
And I think sometimes you have the ecologists that are doing research that is so fascinating, so interesting. They've got their target species and they're finding out all this incredible stuff that we then learn from, and legislation gets updated. And I think that sometimes consultant ecologists can be seen as the bad guys and as client pleasers, basically suggesting that we just say whatever the client wants to say in order to get planning permission. And I'm sure there are companies out there that do that. We call them client compliant. But the vast majority of us genuinely care about the protected species and the species that are protected. We care about those as well. And I did a bird ringing session once. I don't like it, it's stressful, but I did one day of bird ringing, and there was another chap who was there, a lad that had been doing it for ages, and he was getting just about towards his license for bird ringing. And he said, oh, what do you want to do? And I was like, oh, I want to be a consultant ecologist. And honestly, the look he gave me was just filth. Like, he just, he went, really? You want to work in consultancy? And I was like, oh. But really, we're on the front line.
Yeah.
Things need to be built. Our population is expanding, and we have to make sure that losses are properly mitigated against. If a skylark nest is going to be lost from a crop field, we provide 5 elsewhere.
Yes.
So it's just, and it is very thorough. You have to look at everything like as a whole for everything, habitats, special habitats. We do BNG, I won't bore you with that, but biodiversity net gain, where it's going to be a new law in November, which means that every development has to have a 10% net gain for wildlife.
Oh, wow, that's really good news.
So it's a lot of councils are already doing it. So they're already adopting it, and that's their local policy. But I think it's November this year that it comes into law. So it's starting to rack up, and everyone's getting more used to doing it. And there's a new way of classifying habitats, and everything gets a number. It's not without its flaws, but it's in its infancy, really. And then you put in what the habitats are, what's going to be lost, what's going to be kept, what's going to be enhanced. And then if stuff's being done off site, and it has to reach 10%, otherwise you do not get planning permission.
Oh, wow.
So it's things like bird boxes, bat boxes, integrated bat things in the actual buildings, making sure there's green space, making sure there's areas that are left without humans walking around it, and it's a lot of numbers, and it's a lot of, okay, well, what if we added this hedgerow here? How does the calculator look then? And it is quite fascinating. It's a big learning curve, but we're getting there.
Yeah, I saw my first new build with bat boxes in the roof recently. I went to stay at a new build barn up in Leicestershire, and Yeah, it was
my
the first time I'd
hometown.
seen. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
That's where I went to uni. I got there for Download Festival every year.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
And they've got back boxes in the roof now for a lot of the. And I'd never seen that before, but it was just one of those things that you see it and you're like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, it's wonderful,
not?
and more people should have bat boxes, bird boxes, and bats will go in your roof anyway. So
yeah,
you might as well put some boxes up. Yeah. So you know where they are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Brilliant. So I was going to ask you how you became an ecologist, but you've sort of roughly gone into that. But you actually have you have a computational degree background. You're undergraduate.
Yeah, I mean, when I went to uni, I didn't know, and I come from a working class family. Both my siblings left school at 16. Both my parents left school at 16. My dad was a police officer. My mum was a nurse. And I didn't know anybody that had been to university. I was the first one.
Right.
And you'll know that from sort of year 9 onwards, we carry on subjects.
So that's about the age of 14, 15.
13. Yeah. So I guess 13, 14.
Okay.
You carry on a subject to sort of year 10, 11, so up to 16. And then you pick your post 16 A levels. And then the amount of subjects you do gets smaller and smaller, and you pick each time. And nobody explained to me that that's not how university worked.
Right.
So because my mum and dad had no idea, I went to the sort of career counsellor person, and they said, what do you want to do at uni? And I went, IT. I'm good at IT. And they said, okay. And that was the advice. That was it. Because that's, I said to my IT teacher, because it was my best subject, I said to my IT teacher at the time, I was just like, what did you do at uni? She went, oh, I did information management and computing at Loughborough University. And I said, okay, I'll do that.
Right.
And that was literally all of the thought that went into it. And then I remember when I was waitressing through university, there was a lad that came and was waiting. I don't know, well, whatever. And I said, oh, what are you doing at uni? And he said, went zoology. And I was like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
And he was like, zoology. And I was livid. I was just like, it just had not occurred to me the breadth of options out there. And so, I ended up just going into project management, because the degree really, I mean, we had programming and stuff, but it's just that's not for me. Yeah. So a lot of it was sort of how to be organized. That's how I explain my degree is just being organized and dealing with information. Which is how I sort of ended up in project management. Which I like project management. It's fine. I used to one of our where I worked for 2 years, Xbox was our biggest client. So
nice.
We did their social stuff and their website. So we did their website marketing campaigns, which was fun, and I'd have stayed in it. If I didn't get made redundant, we lost them as a client, you see, and then 6 of us got made redundant because we just worked for them. And I'd have stayed in it because it was enjoyable and I liked it, but it was that opportunity that made me go, is this a chance for me to retrain somehow? And luckily I was able, because not everybody can do that. I was able to have a partner that was able to support me, and I sort of took a part-time job while I was fanning about, really just volunteering with the Wildlife Trust, going on like birding days and stuff. I'd started to get into birding by that point because I saw a coal tit on my bird feeder, and I said, what is that?
There's always one. I said in my episode, my thing was a pine cone that got me into my area.
Yeah.
Yours is the coal tit.
Yeah, it was the coal tit. And I went, what is that? And my brother-in-law bought me a do you know Matt Sewell? You'd probably recognise his illustrations. Yeah. So he got me one of those, like garden birds, the garden birds one. And it was, it's beautiful, but it's not brilliant for ID. And I was like, right, okay, I need to get a proper ID book. And that was it. It was just snowball. And so birds were my sort of, I want to focus on birds. And I got bat detector because I went on a bat walk with, I think it was Warwickshire Bat Group. I went on my first bat walk with, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm having the best time, and then I went and bought myself a bat detector, and, that all sort of fit in with ecology so well, they all sort of clicked eventually. It took 3 years, and that's a long time not to have a full-time wage, and we were living in Leamington at the time and the rent prices were insane. So it was quite tough, but I got there in the end. So yeah, I'm lucky enough that I was able to have that support, because not everyone can do it.
Well done you. So, that's amazing. It's taking 3 years out to retrain is, it like big hands down to you for that. It's not easy. It's one of those things that people say, oh, I'd love to have the time to retrain, but actually when you're in that situation, it is incredibly difficult. What's like the best experience that you had when you were doing that sort of retraining with all of your different trusts and things? Sorry,
I think being around other people that are very knowledgeable, and I'm very enthusiastic about stuff I'm interested in. If I'm not interested in it, it's very difficult to interest me. I think it's an ADHD thing for me. Like if I'm interested in it, I will go at it whole hog, and I want to know everything. And the first experience I had was going out with volunteers with Warwickshire Wildlife Trust and just doing I think I was doing 3 days a week with them, just dipping my toe in the water really. And I met actually she's my friend, like longtime friend now, Wendy, who I'm friends with, Wendy Seaton on Twitter. And she was just so knowledgeable about botany, and a lot of them were retired, but because of that and because of that age and experience, they had so much knowledge and are happy to tell you about it. So, I'm saying, what's that? Oh, it's this moth. Why is it that? And when you've got people who are there, particularly the older generation, you've got to suck that knowledge out.
Oh yeah.
and just get it in. And everyone has their interest, and mine are bats and birds, and I'm moving into botany now.
Cool.
But yeah, it just takes time to amalgamate.
Yes.
Is that the right word?
That's a great word.
That's a good word, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a really
Half
good
of
word.
it came into my head and I'm like, I'm going to go for it.
Yeah, I love it.
But yeah, I think I've made friends through it, and I think just learning lots of stuff. I went and got my chainsaw license. I did tree surgery for 8 months or so.
That's cool.
I deviated slightly because I was like, I need some money.
Right.
I moved to Wales and I was like, I need some money. What can I do? And then I started doing a bit of gardening just for sort of, an hourly rate at, local people's houses. And I was like, I could probably do tree surgery because I've felled trees with a bow saw. So, and this chap took me on in the Forest of Dean, and I worked with him for 8 months, got my chainsaw license, and worked as a groundie. So basically just clearing up all the stuff that the climbers are doing. And then eventually I got my climbing license because I did another traineeship with Gwent Wildlife Trust. And now I'm a tree climber as well,
That's amazing.
qualified. So it's just, I think it gave me I had enough time to figure out what it was that I liked doing. And friends. That's the very long-winded answer. Yeah. Very long-winded.
Yeah, no, I saw tree climbing for the first time during my master's a couple of years ago, and it looked like so much fun. And they were offering to sort of let you go up and try it, and I was too nervous, and I ever since have been like, I should have done it.
Yeah.
So now I'm like waiting for my next opportunity, but
yeah, come with me. I'll take you out. It's physically hard.
Yes.
And because I went yesterday for the first time in about 6-7 months, because my particular office only has one climber, and that's me. And you have to go in pairs just for safety. So I went up to Derbyshire to meet one of my colleagues up in the Derbyshire office, and he took me climbing, and we checked back boxes, which was just wonderful. Like but it was physically quite difficult because I was about 6 foot under the box, and it's so physically demanding that you've got to pull your entire body weight up with your arms. You got to try and get your feet on the trunk and do like this weird air thrust.
Okay.
It's not pretty.
No.
It's quite and I slipped, and I've got like bruises on my knees as well, because it's just part and parcel of you see a tree surgeon who does it every day and they're up like a shot. But when you start getting noodle arms like me, like it was quite tiring, and I had to keep every meter or so, I just had a little rest. And he was like, "Are you okay, Nat?" And I was like, "I'm just having a little rest," And then
wait here for a second.
Yeah, but we had most of the bat boxes had bat poo in.
That's good news.
Yeah, so that's good. So the bat boxes themselves were mitigation for a lost roost on a building that has now been demolished.
Okay.
So, yes, we're removing this roost in this building, but right next to it, in all these trees that we're not losing, are, I think, like 11 bat boxes, quite a lot of them. And then what we're doing is then sampling the poo, putting them in little vials, and then that will go off to a DNA to the scientific lab, and then they'll tell us what bat poo it is. And we had a natterer's bat, which I've only ever seen one. So that was really nice to I didn't see it, but he went, "Oh, there's a natterer's in there." Very experienced guy. He's been doing it for, 10 years or 20 years, I think, actually. He told me the other day, and he was just like, "Oh, natterer's in there," and the thing goes straight back on.
Right.
You can't, you can disturb them if you're licensed, but you don't want to.
Yeah, try not to.
And a bat flew out of the other one as we sort of got near it. So the poo will tell us what it was.
Yeah, that must be quite relieving when you set up a new location for them and then you find that they're actually using it.
Yeah, and you're like, that is exactly what it's for.
Yeah.
And then the monitoring is good, rather than just, well, we've put these bat boxes up, we'll just leave them and maybe they'll rot, maybe they'll fall off, whatever, but we've done it. But you can't do that. You have to monitor it, basically. For the license for Natural England, you have to check that they're using what you've put up. So
great, I didn't realize monitoring was part of it as well. So you go back and you check that that's all sorted. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, and that sometimes, depending on species, you might build a specific bat house. If the development's big and it's got a lot of land, they'll build a specific bat house, and you have to make sure that they've built it to the correct specs,
right?
And things like that, and that the hole is the right size. It's for the target species, like everything's very, very specific, and you have to say, "Have you done that?" "No, you've not." "Okay, well, I'm going to go tell on you now."
Oh, yeah.
And you have to go and you have to fix this. This is what you need to fix. You need to make that hole smaller. You need to make sure this is that. And
so I'm sure
you've not planted up this hedgerow, and you need to do that for the the flight lines and stuff. So
yeah, and I'm sure you see people trying to cut corners all the time.
I got told a story by my director the other day that made me laugh. So bats can be an inconvenience to people.
Okay.
If someone doesn't care about animals, doesn't care about biodiversity, all they want to do is turn this barn into flats or whatever. They want to develop the barn. They can see there's bat poo everywhere, so they sweep up the bat poo. And my boss said, he was telling me the story, and he said it was the cleanest barn I've ever seen. Absolutely. There's no way a barn's that clean. It's clearly just been swept. Right. So this guy was aware that there was bats, swept it up. Well, obviously they don't have the expertise that we have. All we have to do is look up at the cobwebs in the ceiling. Bat poo loves a cobweb.
Okay. That's good to know.
It's not just the poo on the floor that shows us that bats are there. It's poo on cobwebs. It's urine staining. It's sometimes grease staining from the fur. It could be a complete lack of cobwebs where there's cobwebs around.
Right.
A little bat-sized, and the wood could be smoothed by the amount of times that bat's going in and out.
Right.
So you do have people that will try and, pull the wool over your eyes.
Yeah.
But they don't obviously have the knowledge that we have. So they don't realise that we can be like, no.
Actually.
Sir.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. Good try, but no.
That absolutely wonderfully introduces the pop culture reference that you have for your episode.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about minute details that help you detect something about your species. So do you want to introduce the concept for your pop culture reference?
Yes. I was like, oh my God, I can't think of anything. I was like, what am I going to say? And then it just went bam.
Yeah.
You've got it. And Sherlock Holmes is my pop culture reference. And that is because, I mean, this sounds weird. How often do you see animals? It's just not. But, animals are very elusive. There's no way that every animal that is using that site that you are visiting is going to be there when you visit.
Yeah.
So you have got to look out for signs particular to that protected species. Obviously, we do look at stuff as a whole and say, hey, there's toads here and whatever, and they're not protected, so they won't stop. Nothing generally stops it unless it's a really, really important habitat, and then, it's up to the council. But yeah, going in, finding clues and figuring out what species are using it, how they're using it, and how many. So, the initial look around of Sherlock Holmes, looking about. Usually I'm Watson.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, do you have a Watson? But you're the Watson.
I'm the Watson most of the time. It depends, because my areas are birds and bats. But if you ask me to go and assess something to do with great crested newts, they're not my species.
Okay.
Badgers aren't my species. I can tell you that there's a badger set there, and I could probably tell you if it's used or not. But when it starts to come to what type of hole it is, whether it's subsidiary, which is, or whether it's a main hole, or whether it's this or that, we have people in the company that are experts at different things. So usually, and really, I'm still a relatively new ecologist. I'm a standard level, so I'm still very much happy to learn new things and learn from people. So I'm normally Watson going, why?
Yeah.
Why?
That's great.
And they're going around and they can just see it. And, I try and sort of absorb as much knowledge as I can, because, I'm very knowledgeable as opposed to a standard person who isn't into wildlife. But compared to the principal ecologists in the company, I'm a toddler.
Yeah.
So it's important to remember that, whatever my knowledge is, it's only going to get more. And I'll do that by going out and learning from people. So yeah, Sherlock Holmes, I'm Watson.
So the one thing I realised that we didn't do, because I completely got distracted, was talking about actually what Sherlock Holmes is. So do you want to quickly give an overview of who Sherlock Holmes is, or do you want me to do that?
No, I can do that.
Okay.
I don't know if, I must have seen the film. I think I watched the Benedict Cumberbatch one.
Okay.
And know of it from Charles. No. Is it Charles Dickens?
No, it's Arthur Conan Doyle.
That's the one. Oh, the guy who really liked the fairies.
Yes.
Like the fairy guy.
The fairy guy.
But that's another pop culture reference.
And also massively really good friends with Harry Houdini.
Yeah, because they were in the film. He was in the film of Fairy Tale. Fairy Tale, A True Story. Yeah. I think it was like 98 or something, which was like magic. Fairies are real. We just haven't found them yet.
No.
But yeah, Sherlock Holmes, basically super clever man, Victorian Britain, goes around solving crimes. I think he just does murders. Does he just do murders? He's like the big time. He's like a bigwig.
I think he does like mysterious disappearances, like that sort of thing. But mostly his interest is if there's a particularly juicy story, those are the ones that he goes for.
Yeah, loves it. He just loves it. And then Watson is his long-suffering sidekick on the side. So, yeah, I was like, you know what? I considered Inspector Gadget.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, Inspector Gadget? Because I suppose Inspector Gadget has the gadgets, right? And that is, also very much what we have. We have lots of different gadgets, to detect the wildlife. So bat detectors is one of the, I don't know how much people realise that what bat detectors are.
No, can you explain what a bat detector actually is? What does it do?
Yeah, so bats communicate using echolocation. When they are at their lower frequencies, we can just about hear them. Young people particularly But if they're social calling to each other, the frequencies is at a lower kilohertz, so we can pick it up. The most of the calls are too high for our ears to pick up. I did read the other day that cats and dogs can hear bats.
Oh, really? That's
which blew my mind a little bit, and I can't give you a source.
That's fine.
I think I did read it, and I was like, oh my god. But the bat detector picks up their echolocation, and then it turns it into noise which we can perceive. And I think one of the fascinating things about bats is they'll go by, they can be over your head, and if you're not looking, you will have no idea that they're there.
Right.
And so they often go unnoticed. Pick up a bat detector, listen to them, and it's a different world. We have 17 breeding species in the UK of bats. I say breeding because I think there's a lone greater mouse-eared bat that came over from France, but apparently some people say it was found dead. It's just, I think it's called Lonesome George or something, like it's quite a lonely. And I think it's a cave in Kent. I think it sort of lives in a cave in Kent, but someone said that had died, but then someone else said that another had been, I'm not sure, but 17 species of bat in the UK. And some of them will sound similar, but depending on the frequency that they call at, and they sound different on the detector. There's a group of species called myotis. Don't ask me how many there are, but I'm not going to say because I don't want to make myself sound like an idiot, but there's a group called myotis that all sound very similar on the detectors. And generally, we will just say it's a myotis species without sort of seeing it, or DNA will go, it's myotis, because it's just so difficult to tell them apart. But a lot of the others, you can say, that's a brown long-eared bat. Okay. That's a common pipistrelle. That's a soprano pipistrelle. Noctules, for example, they will sound like chip pan fat, which is probably something that the youths of today don't know what that sounds like. But when I was a kid, we had a chip pan, which was full of vegetable oil. Yeah. And my parents would heat it, and then that's what we'd have our chips in. And it's the popping of the fat, like, I won't be able to do it. But I remember someone explained it like that once, and I was like, oh my God, it does. And like lesser horseshoes sound, they're mainly sort of southwestern Wales. They sound amazing. They're my favorite sound on a detector because they sound like little aliens in spaceships. Oh, wow. So they go, hang on, let me do it, because I can do this one. They go, and it's very distinctive. That's so cool. And you know, it's just a wonderful sound. Whereas pips will just be more, and they're like, and then they have these cute little feeding buzzes where they're approaching an insect, right? And they're going, and then they're making quicker and quicker calls as they get to the insect, and they go zzz, and you can hear that on the detector, and it brings their world to life because they're so mysterious. The minute you get that detector in your hands, you start to explain, you start to understand what they're doing. Like you can tell from the sound on the detector, are they foraging? Are they commuting? Are they doing social calls? Yeah. Are they chatting to each other? And that, you know, so the echolocation, that's them emitting a sound, and their brain is counting the time it takes for it to bounce off of the thing and come back to them. Yeah. So their hearing is amazing, isn't it? Yeah. And you know, people say blind is about, they're not blind, they can see. Yeah. They're just more reliant on their hearing. And that wasn't found out until the 18th century by an Italian chap whose name is completely begins with S. That's useful. But the name is, he wanted to know how bats could fly around in the dark. Right. So he blinded a bat, not cool. He blinded a bat, and it was still quite happy zipping about, and he was like, okay. He then like plugged the ears, couldn't, you know, and it was like banging into stuff. And he then sort of he was like shouting about it, saying, oh, they're using their ears, and everyone was like, this man's drunk. You know, this man's an idiot. And I think it was quite another 100 years or something at least until that was actually accepted as how they get around, because it's quite weird, isn't it? Yeah. But anything pre-19th century in terms of science
is absolutely bizarre.
Yeah.
The idea
Yeah.
of blinding and then deafening a bat to work out how it flies.
Oh, and you just think, what are you doing?
Yeah.
He's an Italian chap.
Yeah.
But and then different bats, some are louder than others.
Okay.
So brown long-eared, which are my favorite species because they're the cutest. I'll fight anyone. I have a brown long-eared tattoo on my arm. Like,
oh, wow, that's cool.
I just love them. But they've got ears 3/4 of the size of their body.
Oh, massive.
Huge ears. And they're just so cute looking, because some bats can be, I'm not going to say they're ugly, but they're not traditionally cute.
No.
But these are traditionally very, very cute. But because their ears are so big, they tend to listen for insect noises a little bit more.
Okay.
And so when they do echolocate, but they echolocate quieter. They don't need, their ears are so big that they don't need to shout as loudly, because they've got so much space to pick them up.
Yeah.
So that causes a problem for ecologists, because it's quite a lot more difficult to pick them up with a bat detector.
Okay.
So, you know, there's all these sort of different things that you end up learning, and lesser horseshoes are quite difficult to pick up because unless they're right near it, it doesn't pick them up. And whereas serotyns, which are one of the big bats that fly quite high and they forage up in the air rather than down in the woodlands and hedgerows, one went over me I'd not heard one before, but one went over me on a survey last week, and it was like chop 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 chop, and I was like, oh, that's a serotyn, nice.
Wow.
You know, so
Absolutely
they all
screaming.
differ. It's not just bats.
Yeah.
You know, there's 1,400 species. They're the second most diverse mammal species after rodents.
Oh, wow. This is the thing, is that bats, you kind of forget that they are a class of their own, really, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, don't ask me to pronounce the Latin. It's like, it's chiropt. People, I can't believe this. I'm a bat ecologist and I can't say the Latin. It's like chiroptera.
Okay.
But it means wing hand, I think. It means flying hand or something. It's because their wings are their hands, basically, the hand bones that have just extended. Yeah. So I wish I knew how to pronounce that properly. Okay. I'm going to be fired.
I won't. I will forgive you for not being able to pronounce stuff in Latin, because in botany we're trying to pronounce all sorts of things.
Yeah, just name say it with confidence, it'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. No one's wrong when you're trying to speak Latin.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you're Watson or sometimes Sherlock Holmes, and you are given a mission, and your mission is to look at the protected species in an area for where a new build is going.
Yep.
What's the process?
Okay, I'll try not to bore you. Okay. So we'd call it a preliminary ecological assessment. So we call it a PEA. You do a desk study first before you even go to site. You get given the red line boundary is what we call it, of what's being developed. You would then look on, there's a thing called magic maps that ecologists use, which basically has all of the triple SI, so the sites of specific sites of special scientific interests, national nature reserves, local wildlife sites, like everything that is important, basically. And you would then look around that site to see what's in the area. Mm-hmm. And then you then sort of look at the habitats on site, and you sort of go, well, there's a pond there, so I'm going to go and have a look at that and see how vegetated it is, see if it's going to be useful to great crested newts. There's field over there, but how grassy is it? Is that going to be suitable for reptiles? And you start to build that picture before you even set foot on site. And then you go to site, you arrange a site visit, off you go, risk assessments, blah, blah, blah. And then you go to site and you will walk around the entire site.
Okay.
Every bit of habitat you will visit, and you will then I suppose you map out the habitats basically and say, okay, well, that's grassland, but you can't it's not just grassland. What type of grassland is it? Do we have calcareous grassland? Is it meadow? Like, is it other neutral? Like, there's all these sort of ecology terms, and that will depend on what species are on there. Basically, I'm still relatively novice in terms of botany. I'm getting there, and I've been on grasses courses and stuff, and I'm getting more confident, but like, you know, an expert can go on and can pick up and probably writes them down in Latin.
Yeah, my parents actually were taught by a grass specialist who lost his sight, but when he was identifying grasses, he could identify them by touch towards the end, it's
amazing,
because grasses are the most diverse plant species that we have. I can't believe that.
Yeah, it's just, and I thought, because birds and bats, that's my thing, and I was like, I don't care about botany, bear with me. I was like, I don't care about botany. It's not a challenge. It doesn't move. It's just there.
Yeah.
But I've been slowly taught, and I've started to get, the more that I can ID, the more excited I am. Good. The more excited I am, the more I'm like, what's that?
Yeah.
You know, and I want to know, because I don't know what it is, and that's annoying. Yeah. So, you know, and then I will then probably just text the work WhatsApp group and say, what's this? Yeah. And within, you know, 10 minutes, someone will say, that's what this is, you know, and I'm quite good at retaining that. So, you know, if someone shows me tansy, that's it. I've got that. That's one of my new ones. Okay. Tansy. I know that now. I know that it smells nice, and I found some in my garden. So I'm definitely going to know it from now on.
It's amazing, actually, when you get into it. I remember getting into it myself a good couple of years ago now. Initially, everything was sort of green. The more that you start to recognize things, the more you recognize different shades of green, and then different leaf shapes, different flowers. And then eventually it's just like, when you look outside, there's such variation. And that's so exciting. And I wish, I know exactly what you mean. Looking at it, it's like, that's just sitting there. I'm not in any rush.
It's not a challenge. I'm a birder, you know, I've got to go chase birds to find out what bird it is. But I've got 8 species of grass in my garden. Yeah.
Oh, and that's great that you know that now.
Yeah, I got my little grass book out. I went and picked every different sort of grass I could see, and I lined it up on the table, and I sat and went through my book. Yeah. But I know those now.
That's awesome.
You know. Yeah. And then, you know, the habitat's one thing, and then we have to look for the protected species, and say, you know, there's a badger set here. We need to do a badger survey. There's a pond here. It does have potential for great crested newts because it's got this level of vegetation. It's got no fish. Boo. fish will eat the eggs. Yeah. There's no fish in here. There's no waterfowl. It's nicely vegetated, but not too heavily vegetated. That means it's good for great crested newts. So we're going to have to do a DNA survey. Okay. And then if it is positive, then we have to do trapping out. If you're going to look, I mean, GCNs aren't I don't ever do it, and I'm not taking any more unsociable hours. Thank you very much. I'm not doing. I already do night shifts and early shifts for bats and birds, so I'm not taking another unsociable species. Thank you very much. And then we basically come back to the client and say, and we write a report saying basically, this is what's on site. This is the species that we need to further survey for, and then from there we then arrange the surveys. And we then go and do the surveys, and we say you can do bats in the bat season, you can do badgers, and everything has a start and a stop point. And at the minute we're in what we call silly season, because it's just go, because we're time limited on what needs to get in before a certain time. And if we don't get those surveys in, they have to wait another year. Right. Well, is it limited to? Yeah, I guess because animals are seasonal, right? Yeah, exactly. Depending on the species, like obviously you've got and all these crossover. So obviously there's nesting bird season from March to September, right? Which basically means if anyone wants to take any hedging out, for example, you have to have an ecologist there to do a nesting bird check. Okay. As you go, right? And if you find a nesting bird, forget it. Yeah. You know, the ECOW, it's this ecological clerk of works. Their job is basically to say, no, there is a bird nest here. I'm going to put a sort of 10-meter buffer around that, and you're not allowed to disturb that because that's obviously breaking the law. You've got bats, which are quite March to the end of October. well, April to the end of October. I mean, they don't keep to the rules, but they then go into hibernation. Okay. So we can't do surveys from November onwards until sort of the end of March because they're asleep. We can't, and you can't disturb them.
No. So is this partly the reason why so much building and stuff is delayed to certain seasons? Wow. Yeah. So animals are literally stopping because I wonder why not that much happens over, because I appreciate it's cold outside, but so why would you want to do building?
Yeah.
But it is interesting that nothing happens in particular months, and that's because you guys have to be on there.
Yeah.
Sign stuff off. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why the season is so intense for ecologists in the summer. Like, we're doing dusk dawn bat surveys. So we're having 2 hours, 3 hours sleep in the middle of the night, getting up, doing the dawn survey. I mean, thankfully I work at a company where they're very good with that. You only do a certain amount a week and it's all spread out really well between everybody. But I know of companies that put people on straight dusk dawns for the entire week, for the entire season.
Oh my God.
So they've got no life because they're spending the entire weekend recovering. Like I was supposed to go up to Yorkshire last weekend for a friend's child's christening, and I just said, I'm really sorry, no. That's really because hard. I was just like, I'm so tired. Yeah. Like, I cannot imagine traveling up to Yorkshire and then coming back and having to start another week. And we're a really good company that makes sure that we get enough rest and everything else. And, and it's still really tiring. Yeah. So I think I forgot my train of thought. I can't remember what the start of my point was. Often I do that. I go off on one and then suddenly I can't remember the point I was trying to make. But the hours can be very unsociable. And the breeding bird surveys are up until the end of June. And because I don't actually live in Oxford, I work in Oxford. I live in Worcestershire, so it takes me about just over an hour to get into the office. So if I've got to start a nesting bird survey at dawn, I have to get there at about 5-6 o'clock. Obviously it depends what time, the hours get longer and whatever, but it's shattering.
Yeah, I bet.
And then we spend quite a lot of winter doing the preliminary stuff, but then also to say, well, next year you're now going to have surveys, but also writing up all of the stuff that we've been doing over the summer. That then all the bat data needs to be analysed, all the recordings. People need to look at all the recordings and say, you've got this many passes of this bat. And, it's a lot of work, but it is really, I enjoy it. I feel quite lucky. Like when I get up, I think I had a tweet that did quite well, where I just sort of said, I'm getting up at 4 a.m. to go on a bird survey. I'm paid to look at birds. I'm paid to look at birds. I'm paid to look at birds. And it was just this, like, no one wants to get up and do unsociable hours, but I'm paid to look at birds. Yeah. I'm paid to look at bats. I'm paid to look for animals. That's literally my job. So, you have to remind yourself, I could be doing something that I hate, and I don't hate this. I love it. So, we need more ecologists. But that's just a shout out. We're like the industry's struggling quite a bit with recruiting.
Really?
I moved jobs. Yeah, I moved jobs in. I started my new job in January, and I had my pick.
Wow.
Like, I turned one job down, and people are struggling to recruit because I don't know. Is it the unsociable hours? Like,
maybe,
but then reputable companies are good at making sure, people aren't overworked, but burnout is a very real thing at this time of year. So maybe people just was one of those people that got put on straight dusk dawns and they didn't want to do it anymore and went, this is rubbish.
I think the other thing is, from my memory, when I was actually doing ecology at uni, it was one of those ones where they said, if you want to get into ecological consultancy, don't bother, it's so oversubscribed. So lots of people didn't even take a look at it. So I wonder if partly it's because that message is still there that immediately detracts people away from it.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't believe it when I got my first ecology job, and I think the reason that I got it was because I had a history in project management, and I had a good history in report writing, and 50% of ecology is writing reports. And so that's, even though like I had the worst imposter syndrome when I started my first job. Oh, it was awful. I started my first job and I'd got people who were younger than me that had got masters in marine biology, and my only relevant qualification at that point was and whether that was even relevant was my practical conservation diploma, which, you know, it sort of shows that I have wildlife knowledge, like general sort of wildlife knowledge, but it's not a sort of, you know, it's not a degree, it's not a master's. And I felt completely, what am I doing? All these people have got degrees in this field. Like, I just feel like an idiot. But I think because I'm so enthusiastic and I'm very honest about what I know and what I don't know, and because I was a bit more grown up, because I'd had quite a lot of experience in, you know, in the working world. This wasn't just my first job, like fresh faced, you know, I was quite realistic and knew how to handle clients. And, you know, I ended up doing a stint on HS2 for 2 years.
Really?
And that was something, it wasn't, so 90% of the work in my old company was HS2.
So HS2, for my listeners who are outside the UK, is high speed rail number 2 that has been being built for like 10, 12 years, 15 years now. I believe it's very over budget. It's basically a rail that's supposed to connect the north to London. And so you can imagine the amount of work that creates for ecologists. It's going through ancient woodlands. It's being built by the government. So if the government wants to put it down, the government will put it down. And I tried to tell myself, like, I'm not going to bash anyone that works on HS2. I did it for 2 years, and it gave me the experience that I needed to then work for a company that had more diverse projects. You know, and smaller. It's not, I actually work for a bigger consultancy now, but we have much more individual projects, small things, rather than one huge big thing that you're doing same thing day in, day out. And I forgot what the start of my point was again.
You're
doing stints on HS2.
And I you know what, it destroyed my soul a bit.
Really?
And I just I didn't feel proud of what I was doing. And I was always doing my best and was like my integrity for, I don't care if this annoys you. I don't care if this delays anything. This is my opinion and I'm not changing it. You know, but I just thought, you know what, I retrained and I'm still not happy. I love working with bats and I got my bat license while I was working there. But it just wasn't, I went to the big bat conference, virtually, the national bat conference, and some of the talkers were like, oh, well, you apply for bat licenses. You all know what I'm talking about. And they mean for buildings, specific licenses to destroy roosts in buildings by moving the bats. And I don't mean kill, I mean, you know, remove the roost basically and put it somewhere else. And they sort of said it like, oh, well, you'll all have written, you know, countless licenses. You'll know what I mean. And I was just like, I don't know what you mean, because I was just working for HS2, just them doing the same thing all the time and only doing a small section. I was only doing the surveying, and then everything else then went to another company, which then went to another company. And so I just thought, I don't feel fulfilled. I need to move somewhere. And I was very strict. Like, I had companies saying, "I'll come and work for us." I was like, "Do you work on HS2?" And they'd say yes, and I go, "Well, I'm not working for you then." And they're like, you don't have to work on, and it's not, I will never work for, you know, a company that does some work on HS2, but I didn't want to risk, there's no point out of the frying pan into the fire. If I wasn't happy working on HS2, there are companies that don't need to, you know, have it, work on it. But it's a big employer, but it's, you just see too many, and they are doing good mitigation. The ecologists are doing good work, and we're doing what we can. You know, if we weren't there, think of the think of the devastation. You know, we're doing our best. But for me, it just became a little bit like, I can't do this anymore.
This is a side note, but I have a friend who is an archaeologist, and she worked on HS2, actually, interestingly. And she said the same thing, exactly the same thing. But because archaeology depends on rain, and if it rains, they have to wait 3 days for the groundwater to empty. Whenever it rained, they would put them on site, and they couldn't do work, but they weren't allowed to leave site. So they just had teams of archaeologists just sitting.
Waste of money.
Such a waste of money. And she said, you know, you can only sit in one of these temporary boxes.
I've been in
so many weeks before you're like, what's my life for? What am I doing? It is soul destroying. And it's really sad to think that HS2 is ruining so many people's experiences. When actually both archaeology and ecology are really rewarding jobs.
And I think without it, I think that it started my career off. It gave me an opportunity, an employable opportunity, to go in and get 2 seasons of bats under my belt, and you know, that then meant that I was then able to apply for somewhere else. So as a springboard, it got me to where I needed to be. But it wasn't particularly rewarding. No. You know, like I'd gone in and I worked for a company that did vegetation clearance. So, you know, I was mainly on trees rather than buildings, you know. And I'd be there upgrading the trees. I'd be like, nope. This is moderate potential, this tree, this requires 2 surveys, okay, bye. You know, and the stuff that wasn't even noted by any other ecologist before, and then from, you know, other companies, and I'd go in and I'd be like, you know, this isn't on my list, this tree in this woodland isn't on my list, and I mean, look at the holes in it. And so I'd put it as moderate, and then I'd hear from the surveys that happened that a bat flew out, you know, and you're like, I got you. I got you back. The fact that you do your project write-up actually really does make you Watson as well, because he has to write everything up that Sherlock does and then publishes it in the newspaper. So you truly are. I absolutely love that. Such a good analogy for it. What's one thing you wished people knew about your job? If you could just tell them one thing about being an ecological consultant. I mean, you've covered a couple of things already, but if you could only tell people one thing. Please come and join us. It's very rewarding. We are on the front line of helping save habitats and wildlife from building and development, which is going to happen. And we need more people who care in ecology, because and you end up being with like-minded people as well. Like the jokes going around the office today about, there was one of the lads hadn't shaved for a couple of days, and I said to him, I was like, oh Jamie, you're getting a bit of a beard. And then we started, a couple of the other lads started talking about habitat assessments for scrub. And it was just, you know, it was just the nerdiest. No one outside an ecology office would understand what on earth we were talking about, but it was just absolutely brilliant. So you find your people, you know. And I had a chaffinch fledgling in the garden about half an hour before the call, that plopped out of a tree, which must have been nesting in the ivy. And, you know, I took a little video of it feeding, and it goes straight to the work chat. Really? Because, you know, and we share stuff, you know, out of hours as well. Look at this moth, you know, look at, you know, and it's amazing to learn from other people, and you can only grow your knowledge. Yes. You know, I can teach people who are experts at bats stuff about birds, you know, and I like doing that, and I like quizzing people and going, right, what bird do you think that is? You know, and then I'll try and describe this, and it's while you're out and about doing it, and they'll be like, is that a blackbird? And I'm like, no, you know, and it's just so nice. And then they're then teaching me botany. you know, and it's just that nice exchange of like everybody cares about the same thing. It's just everyone has their little areas that they're really good at, and we're all sort of helping each other. So you can find your people.
That's really sweet. What a lovely thing to say. So you've already said your favorite bat is the long-eared,
brown long-eared.
Yeah. But I mean, you're welcome to keep that answer or change it. But normally when I ask biologists if they have a favorite bird or bat based on, you know, whichever area they work in, they always have a really good answer. So you can say that one, or you can change to another one, maybe like a really cool species that you know about. But could you tell me about one?
Brown long-eareds are my faves. There are like sort of pictures of other bats that just look incredible that aren't in the UK.
Okay.
The Honduran white bat is one that, oh my God, stop it. They're like, I mean, it gets widely shared on Twitter. I mean, they're called the Honduran white bat, so I presume they live in Honduras.
Yes.
They're white and they have little yellow, sort of pale yellow noses and ears. And nest isn't the word, they roost, nest. What am I saying? They roost in leaves.
Oh, wow.
That clap sound for anyone who's not watching the video was me pretending to be a closing leaf. And they're just so cute, and they're so unlike our species. So I'd love to see bats in other countries. I think particularly tropical bats, and I'd love to go to Australia. And I've got a fact about Mexican free-tailed bat that I wrote down.
Okay.
How fast do you think bats can fly in miles per hour?
Okay, so I have some bats in my garden. They flit about quite quickly. I don't know. Oh, I'm really bad at this. Maybe like, I would say at top speeds, diving, maybe verging on like 30 miles an hour.
Okay, it's a good guess. I didn't know this either until because I was like, oh, there's gonna have to be bat facts, and then every fact about bats leaves my brain completely, and I was just like Googling like, what are bat facts? A lot can reach 60 miles an hour.
Okay.
But the Mexican free-tailed bat, which is in the southern states and Mexico, can reach 100 miles an hour in a dive.
Wow.
Which makes it the fastest mammal on the planet.
No.
Yeah, which is just like, that's so cool.
That's so cool. That's so fast.
So fast. I mean, they go whipping past like before you've even realized it, and they are more maneuverable than the vast majority of birds.
That would really hurt if it miscalculated.
You know what? There's an amazing interview with David Attenborough, and he was in one of these huge caves on this massive pile of guano with bats flying around, and he was like, a lot of people are scared of bats and that they're going to get tangled in their hair, but don't worry, they won't. They can, you know, and explains echolocation, and they can see him, you know, and then apparently as soon as the cameras turned off, one of them smacked him in the face.
Oh no. Oh, I was going to say, where's that video? But
I know, which is just brilliant. And he was just telling this story, and I just thought it was just amazing. So hopefully the bat was okay. I'm sure it was just flew off, going a bit embarrassed.
Oh, brilliant. Well, all the ones you've mentioned today, I'll put on my Instagram and Twitter at Biologist of it. So any of my listeners or viewers can go and have a look at them and pop all those facts in there as well. Thank you. That's really interesting. As well as being on Twitter as yourself, you also are on Twitter with your own podcast. And I was wondering if you wanted to introduce that a little bit.
Yes. I mean, yes, I'm an ecologist, but I have a podcast about history.
A little bit left field.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy history just as much as I enjoy wildlife and ecology. You know, I wanted to be an archaeologist when I was a kid. I wanted to be a historian, and it just sort of never happened. And I went into ecology instead, which is fine. And someone said, I was telling someone a fact about trees. And they
Often how it starts.
Yeah. And they were like, oh, I can't remember what it was, but it was brilliant. And they said, oh, you should do a podcast. And I was like, should I? And I thought, do I do a wildlife podcast, there's already so many brilliant ones out there.
Yes.
You know, or I wonder if I should do a history one, because then that gives me an excuse to research. I already sort of get my wildlife fix in my day-to-day life. So, you know, this would then force me to go and do, you know, some extra research in a completely different topic area that, you know, I really enjoy. So it's called Across the Ages. And the unique thing about it is I will pick one topic and follow it across time and cultures.
That's really cool.
So I won't talk about one person, I will talk about a thing. So whether it's a concept. So my first one was on shoes.
Okay.
I don't know why, I just thought shoes. And so, you know, I cover things like the chop-ins, which are those huge ones that got like ridiculous, like a meter high shoes, like Venetian women were wearing meter high shoes. And, you know, I sort of pick either the funny or the extreme things, because you can't go through that. You know, I generally pick the oldest known pair of shoes.
Okay.
Or if it's a specific piece of clothing or something that is an object, I'll talk about the oldest instance of that. But then generally I'll pull it through and then, you know, look at Asia, ancient Rome, ancient Egypt, Persians, you know, whatever I suppose I find the most interesting things in. And if it's not an object, so objects wise, I've done hats. That was a very frivolous one. It was fun.
That sounds fun.
I did hats, which is, it doesn't sound like it's going to be interesting, but it is. I've done hoaxes across the ages. So I just picked lots of hoaxes, like when we spoke about Arthur Conan Doyle earlier, I covered that. It's not really a hoax. I covered the fairy hoax, you know, and talked about that. And also I've done weapons, which is not generally in my vibe. I'm not someone, you won't get military history in my podcast.
Okay.
I'm absolutely not interested in that. I'm a social history person. I prefer sort of life at home, I guess. So weapons and even down to spear throwers, you know, that sort of revolutionized hunting for humans is like a little thing that you fit in your hand that makes your spear go further. Like, and it makes me learn stuff. I did contraception.
Okay. I bet that is an interesting one.
Excuse the pun. That is nuts. Like, you know, the things that mostly women have had to do across time and cultures is absolutely insane. They've like poisoned themselves with mercury. There was some in the American West, they used to boil down beaver testicles and put it in with moonshine.
Oh my gosh.
In ancient China, they used to drink mercury. Lead, like honestly, nuts. And it gives me it's very sweary. Because I am very sweary. I've been very well behaved.
You've been on your best behavior.
I really have. But my podcast is all gloves off.
Nice.
So, you know, and I just tend to just riff whatever I feel like talking about. And I'm very selfish. I talk about what interests me. And if I'm researching it and I'm finding it boring, it does not make the cut.
Right.
It's very, it's very fast. You know, I tend to keep them under half an hour because the speed at which I talk is very, very fast. So, you know, they're probably 45 minutes worth of content, but I just smash through them. I just don't need to breathe.
No.
But people seem to like them. I mean, it's picked up quite well. I've not done an episode for quite a while, and it's because it's silly season.
Yeah.
I'm so busy. Sometimes I can't even socialize. I'm so tired. So I just can't think. Each episode takes 12 hours to research.
Yeah,
it takes a lot because it's lots of mini facts. Because it's not just I'm not looking at one person, you know, I'm looking at one thing, one culture for 5 minutes.
Yes.
Then I'm going on to the next one. So it generally tends to be quite a top level look into each sort of time and culture, but I enjoy it and people seem to really like it. I've got 2 subscribers. I don't want to show off, as in paid subscribers.
Really?
Yeah, which is just, and then I feel awful because I've not put anything out for a while, you know, but I did a sort of coffee thing saying, you're not going to get anything extra for this.
Yeah.
I can barely commit to the episodes, but if you'd like to tip me, and I didn't even turn on the subscription option. It happened automatically.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and then I was like, suddenly had 2 subscribers and I was like, oh, I love you.
Yeah, thank you.
But I've recently tipped over 21k listens.
Congratulations
21,000. Thank you very much. So and it is nice, and you get someone, just a random, not even your mum.
Yeah.
You know, you just get a random person saying, oh, I really enjoyed this episode, or you see a review and you don't recognize the name. It's not like a Twitter friend.
Yeah.
You're like, thanks, friend, checks in the post, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, they say, oh, this podcast's amazing. Oh, she's hilarious. And I'm like, all I want to hear in life is she's hilarious.
Yeah.
That is just top level compliment for me, because I like laughing. I like making people laugh. Like, that's what brings me quite a lot of joy. So yeah, I'm like, tick, that's my ego for the day. I'm fine. So I will try and put something new out soon. I have started a new episode on great human migrations.
Ooh, that would be interesting.
I say I might drop the great, because by great I mean big.
Long human migrations, yeah.
Like sort of the amount of people moving, rather than these were really good.
Okay.
Because, you know, obviously you've got, you know, the slave trade, for example, you know, that is a huge human migration.
Yeah.
It's great in terms of size, but obviously it's not great really.
So it's more like mass human migration.
Yeah, I'll probably change the name, but I started, you know, I have started that, but hopefully once work starts winding down a little bit and I'm not working such and sociable hours, I feel like I can commit a little bit more time to it. But that's the beauty of your own podcast.
Yeah, so if you want to go and listen to Nat's podcast, it's Across the Ages, and she's on Twitter as well with it.
Yep. At underscore Across the Ages.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we don't get the wrong one.
No, I mean, I don't know what the other one is, but don't follow them.
No. We're not interested in them.
No.
And then speaking of Twitter, I asked earlier if we had any questions for you, and I've got 2 questions for you from Twitter.
Oh, no, you haven't.
So no pressure, no pressure.
Okay.
So the first one comes from Anxious Plant, who is also wonderful on Twitter, and she's asking how effective are bat highways. And I had this same question for you, so I was waiting for this segment to do that, because I've got bat highways between here and London. They're like bridges. So above some roads, there are almost like pylons with rope bridges between them, and supposedly they're to help bats cross highways.
Oh, nice. Okay, well, bats have flight lines. We call them flight lines, and that is a linear feature which they use to commute from A to B. Okay. Depending on the species, but a lot of species won't just fly across an open field. Okay. Generally, they'll go along a hedgerow, and often forage under it as well. But you know, when you're looking at a development, you have to sort of look at flight lines, saying, you know, if I get rid of this section of hedgerow, for example, that breaks the flight line up, which means that the bat then can't get over there. Okay. So I didn't know these things existed, but linear features that they can navigate through using flight lines will be good.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's definitely better than not having it.
Oh, absolutely. And you often, if you know, look outside at night, and obviously, but when you're in your house, they will use a building, they'll use houses, a row of houses as a flight line. Oh, okay. So often if you look outside, you want to look just after dusk. So just check what time sunset is. And that's around the time they're going to start emerging, depending on the species. Pipistrelles, which are the most common ones, you're going to see coming out 10 minutes after the sunset time. So just stick your head out a window. Yeah. And have a look. And it is likely that they're going to be using your house, your flats, your, you know, any hedgerows, any fences as flight lines. And that's where you're going to see them. Cool. So I would say probably very effective, because it just gives them a little map. Yeah, because the ones in my garden use my fence then, I guess, because I always see them going up and down the same. That's really interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And they're quite loyal. They're quite loyal to roots. There was I'm going off on a tangent now, but this is interesting, I promise. There's a lesser and greater horseshoe roost that I was monitoring when I was living in Wales, like on a voluntary basis, with one of my very good friends, Angus, who taught me a lot about bats. And you basically do the roost count every year just to monitor how they're doing. And there was a Land Rover parked immediately outside the barn. Okay. Right. So what the bats used to do is go over the Land Rover and then swoop down.
Okay.
Right. And then back up. The Land Rover then moved.
Okay.
But the bats for ages did the same route out, and as if there was a Land Rover still there.
Wow.
Like they did that same route. So they're quite loyal to, I go this way. And sometimes they won't even call when they come out of a roost because they know where they're going for that first bit, because it's so routine. They do it so often. I mean, they change roosts quite a lot, but you know, if it's a big roost like that, they'll be quite loyal to it. So it's just fascinating. They make this mental map, and that's the map. So you can imagine how jarring it is for them for something suddenly not to be there.
Yeah, that's like when it's dark, sometimes I won't turn the lights on when I'm heading downstairs to get water. You just know the way to the kitchen. Yeah. If I put anything in my way, that's it. I'm falling down the stairs.
Like, bye. Oh. Yeah.
And the second question that we've got is from Craig Hoover, who asks, is there territory plant/plant target overlap between bats and birds like there is with different pollinators?
You're going to have to slightly rephrase the question because I don't understand.
So pollinators have like territory, like they have like turf wars between different pollinators.
Right.
Is there like a turf war, a niche war between bats and birds at all in the UK?
I don't know. I wouldn't have thought so. I mean, you'll have predators taking bats out. You'll have... But that's not really a territory war. That's more just predation from owls, predation from sparrowhawks and stuff like that, sort of as they're coming out and the sparrowhawks are going to bed, or obviously, you know, at night with owls. But I mean, there's not a huge amount of crossover, because on dawns, you've got your species that start calling early, and that's things like song thrush, wren, and you start to hear them, you know, picking up in the dawn chorus, and really they're super busy calling, doing their dawn chorus, telling everyone this is my territory, bugger off. The bats don't care. Okay. You know, they're back in bed. Yeah. You know, so not to my knowledge, and to be honest, it's not something that we ever talk about or consider in any sort of bat conversation that I've ever had with any expert. So I mean, bats are still a bit of an enigma, so you never know what you don't know in science, but I don't think so at the moment from what I understand. Okay. Yeah. Oh, cool. Thank you so much for answering those. Pressure. Yeah, sorry. I'm a toddler. A toddler, I say. Don't know anything. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's been absolutely lovely having you, and I've learned so much about bats and just ecology. It's been wonderful. Yeah, it's been really fun. You know what, I've had such a busy week, and I'm sorry I had to move the date, but I just had to go up to the climbing, sort of, you know, it was quite far away, and I've had such a busy week, and I just thought, but it's just been, as soon as I turned on, like, it's just been really nice and lovely, and you know, upbeat, and it's been really nice. So thank you very much for asking me. I was like, whenever I'm asked, I'm like, me? Yeah, of course. And people love hearing about what ecologists are up to. And so it's just like as a side note, I know that it's difficult having imposter syndrome and feeling like you're not quite within a niche, but you have the passion and enthusiasm of an ecologist. So I feel like that is half the battle with it. It absolutely is. And that's, to be honest, that's what my associate director says to me. Like, she's like, you're like, well, I had my probation, my second out of 3, because it's a 9-month probation. Okay. And I had my 6-month probation, and I looked at the feedback from sort of all the people higher up, and it was all like very enthusiastic. You know, has stuff to learn, but is really willing and really, you know, and asking the right questions. I was like, yes. That's all you can ask for, really, because you can be really good at your job, but people find you boring. No one wants to work with someone who's boring. No. It's just like snore. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, thank you so much. So again, people can find you on Twitter at Nat Sabin. Nat Sabin, yeah. Or at _across the ages. Yeah, that's right.
And if you want to see anything that I've mentioned today, you can find it at Biologist of It on Twitter and Instagram. And I have been B. Nat, you have been absolutely wonderful. This has been the Biologist of It, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.